Hello, I'm Gordon Brown, and this is greeneconomy.tv. Welcome, as always, every Wednesday to the Circular Economy Show, where we're going to be picking up on our theme that we teed off with last week of electronic waste. This week, it's part 2, national context. But to tell you more about it and introduce our guests, our resident expert, Chris Whyte from the Africa Circular Economy Network, is here to join me. And we have a special guest today, Susanne Karcher from the Sustainable Recycling Industries, and that acronym is pronounced SRI. So when we talk about SRI, that's the Sustainable Recycling Industries. Welcome to you, Susanne, as well. Over to you, Chris. Please give us a sense of the key issues that we're facing as far as electronic waste is concerned. How's it affecting us nationally? And what are the intelligent and meaningful things that companies and organizations like the Sustainable Recycling Industries are doing to address these issues, Chris?
Perfect. Thank you, Gordon. Always great to be back. And welcome to all the listeners and those who are going to be streaming it afterwards. So today, again, we're looking at this 3-stage process where we look at local, national, and international. Today, we are focusing on e-waste on a national level. Last week, we looked at a local level. And to put that into perspective, we looked at the numbers coming out of the Western Cape at around about 40,000 tons a year of electronic waste and white waste. So if we look at the description, again, of WEEE, pretty much anything with that works on electricity or a battery. But when we take it to the national level, it starts to get a little bit scary. And we're looking here at around about 6.2 kilograms of e-waste per inhabitant per year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that adds up to about 370,000 tons of electronic waste. Now, the problem with this is that, even though this is only sort of a 5 to 8% component of the waste stream, it's growing at a massive rate. And e-waste has grown at 21% in 5 years. So it's one of the fastest growing waste streams that we're having to deal with, but it's one of the most problematic. And the reasons why is that there's a whole bunch of hazardous materials that come with that. And currently, electronic waste is classified as hazardous in this country. And through the inappropriate handling and management of those different products, we can expose ourselves to chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs, to lead, mercury, and other poisons. And also, if we look at the inappropriate management of that can also create secondary gases, dioxins, furans, and highly carcinogenic emissions that are pretty much deadly. So the idea is to look at it and understanding what we're trying to do from tackling it on a national level. And from that respect, that's why we have one of the country's leading experts in terms of electronic waste, and Susanne Karcher, who is currently the national coordinator for the World Resources Forum and the SRI, or Sustainable Recycling Industries Program. So welcome, Susanne. Fantastic to see you here. We see each other often, but this is a different format. So welcome.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Thanks for having me, Gordon. And fire away. What are the questions?
Maybe what we can try and do is to look, first of all, at just a brief little video describing some of the problems that we're looking at in terms of the program developments for the country. Byron, do you want to throw that first little video clip in there, please?
Mustafa is only 11 years old. He works at a scrap metal yard near Accra in Ghana. He can't go to school, and it looks as if he'll never be able to escape the hazardous work environment. International experts and stakeholders have now decided to tackle these problems. They were brought together by the World Resources Forum with support from the Swiss government. They have created the Sustainable Recycling Industries Roundtable and developed the Guidance Principles for the Sustainable Management of Secondary Metals, an ISO process. The 5 guidance principles for improving recycling practices are enabling safe, healthy and equitable working conditions, building local community relations and resilience, conserving and protecting the environment and natural resources, improving recovery of secondary metals, implementing a sustainable management approach. The guidance principles are important because they can also ensure a credible traceability of the recovered metals. Manufacturers of products that contain recycled metals all over the world need solid guarantees that these are sustainably produced. This is good for the economy, the environment, and the people. After joining a program for working children, Mustafa can go back to school. He now wants to learn more and help to build up his country. If everybody uses the guidance principles, then we can all continue enjoying our devices, knowing that we are creating a success story. Do you want to be part of this story? You are most welcome to contact us to learn more about the guidance principles and join the Sustainable Recycling Initiative.
Fantastic. So that's a clip of the video that's been created by WRF and SRI for the global program. So the problem statement, again, we mentioned some of the issues around it being hazardous. I think that we mentioned in the last show that we have seen certain elements coming forward locally from a national perspective. There's been a ban on e-waste to landfill as of the 23rd of August this year in South Africa. And there's also the implementation of the extended producer responsibility regulations and guidelines that came into effect on the 5th of November. But it's a big issue, 370,000 tons per year, and only 12% of that's recycled, Susanne. We need to do a lot more. Tell me a little bit more about the SRI program, that it is a multi-country program, and what some of the main components are in terms of what we're looking at.
Yeah, look, we came in at the perfect time. It's really the perfect storm. I was part of this table of all those managers sitting down, the round table that developed the SRI guidelines at the time. We were not part in South Africa of phase 1, but we are now part of phase 2. There are 5 countries in total, including Egypt, Peru, Colombia, and Ghana, and us in South Africa. And we are all running the phase 2. And the idea really is to create level playing fields and to really address all those issues. Interesting enough, a lot of the countries are very much on the same level in terms of trying to implement EPR, also battling a huge informal sector that needs to be meaningfully integrated and under those guidance principles, also creating an enabling environment that is not harmful to the people coming from those places.
Just a question from my side. I see that the countries involved in the program are developing countries. And obviously these are not the countries that are generating the bulk of the e-waste. Does the program largely focus on the processing and the actual recycling of e-waste that's coming from other destination countries, or is it focused on those countries specifically?
It's actually focused on creating policy and knowledge capacity in those countries. So the idea really is about knowledge transfer. Switzerland is very advanced. In Switzerland, you have actually one of the highest recycling rates in the world. I think it's around 80%, something ridiculous at 80%. We're sitting at 11 to 12%, okay? So what Switzerland can offer is a lot of knowledge, also in terms of auditing, also in the development of what they call norms and standards that would then define the working conditions of e-waste operators, because you have different type of people trying to do different type of things with electronic waste. And things can go quickly out of hand if you don't have norms and standards. So what makes the SRI project so exciting and unique is that all those 5 countries have the same generic lock framework, which means the generic outcomes that are envisaged from this project. And the one is related to really assist each of those countries developing e-waste policy. Okay. The second one is really related to the development of norms and standards, so that we can look at specific activities that form part of the country's e-waste value chain. So from the collector to the guy that transports it, to the guy with the screwdriver that dismantles some of the stuff, to someone who's then really doing mechanical processing in order to concentrate value fractions, and to the guy who then is doing end processing, which means refining, which we don't have that much in Africa capacity, but most of that gets sent overseas. But the idea is really that everyone gets a nice set of rules, what they can and what they can't do. And that's the norms and standards That's what I'm currently trying to assist our government to develop. Obviously, this is a fully transparent and inclusive process. So when I say I do that, it just means I'm having a first step that we can put something on the table for everyone else to give their input. So both the policy development as well as norms and standards will be completely transparent processes, and we will have stakeholder input at all times. So those are the two key deliverables on a national level. Also, the development of curriculum is very important. One of the things they want to see in the SHRI program is a entry-level training for collectors and dismantlers, and then something a bit more advanced. And again, the perfect storm in South Africa. We have two SETAs that have pushed ahead. The one is an MICT SETA that wants to develop an advanced e-waste training program, which is around e-waste operation controller. So there would be a guy that would work in a processing facility. And the other guys from EW SETA, they look at something a bit more basic that would go into the field of an e-waste entrepreneur. And I think that's a highly relevant subject. You know, in South Africa, we have a lot of pressure to create meaningful and safe jobs. And an e-waste entrepreneur sounds like a really good idea to me. So those are the three national key outcomes. There's a fourth one that's related to hazardous waste solutions that we find those as well.
So just a quick point, another one from me before Chris jumps back in. But so you mentioned working with government, creating policy, creating standards and so forth. And these things are absolutely necessary. But we also know just how difficult government finds it to actually implement and police and deliver on these things. What are you doing at an industry level, working within the context of extended producer responsibility and consumer outreach and so forth to really try and get this thing to function on its own and to have its own economics? And I guess that's where the e-wastepreneurs come in. Perhaps just talk us through the money. How does it all work, and how do people, how's the thing going to self-fund and self-sustain itself?
Well, I mean, the big thing, obviously, that is on our side is the EPR. That's obviously the horse that we all back. Extended producer responsibility, because that means that South Africa has joined the ranks of the countries that is firmly putting the responsibility onto the producers. This producer responsibility will then be translated down to producer responsibility organizations, those PROs. And those PROs will then basically be concerned to deal with the recyclers, find those recyclers that can then collect and responsibly treat all types of electronic waste. In the EPR is also a huge direct requirement for informal sector integration. So it's not a case of they can be left outside. Municipalities will have to play a major role as well on informal sector integration. So it looks good in principle. And if I look at how I try to structure the policies, and if I look at how I try to structure norms and standards, seeing that the national sports of South Africa is to actually budge the law, I try to get away with as little as possible structures that require law enforcement. So I'm a big fan of the carrot approach, creating the right incentives and really draw clear lines in the sand. So no blurred lines, what you can do, what you can't do. If you're a collector, you are a collector, you are a collector. And we need to create an incentive that you as the collector, unless you have access to a safe facility to dismantle, you are not fiddling around with this equipment. And that incentive can be created by giving you the best price if you bring everything that you have collected back to the recycler. That's really where we're trying to go with this EPR, that we clearly divert those functions, because the big mess in Africa and India and China has really started because collectors are left on their own devices. They are sometimes indirectly also encouraged by the recyclers because they don't want to get their hands dirty. So they say to the guy, we only want the printed wire boards. Please just give us a printed wire board. And we spoke to some recyclers. If you as a collector without EPR would bring back just the stuff that they like and do the dirty work for them, so to speak, you can get up to 3 times more money. And that's obviously the wrong money flow. The money must be sitting in, you bring everything back, because the EPR money will take care of treating the non-value fractions, the hazardous fractions responsibly as well.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think what we've covered there, Susanne, is that there's a gap. So the gap is looking at putting together system structures and a systemic approach towards addressing the gaps and how we need to charge that forward. So how do we go from our 12% recycling and meet what the Swiss are doing. So there's a lot of work that's been happening, and we talk about policy. And a lot of people always shoot us down and say, well, but you can't do policy. And no, we're not doing policy. We are guiding policy. So the directive is that we are getting support from a European perspective to help drive the process from within. This isn't being dictated from a European perspective. So that's why there's a massive multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder approach looking at both government, industry, civil society, waste pickers, collectors, everybody in the value chain are part of this process going forward. Still, as we get to the top of that chain, and we've now got these things, and poor old Susanne, I think she's going to have a hairstyle like me by the time she's finished, getting all the documents together, that then still needs to go to government, and government needs to promulgate that and take it through its systems as well.
That's right, Chris.
So the big talk is there. We understand the big talk and the issue in terms of looking at the documentation and the talk shops and everything else. What is the SRI program doing in terms of local implementation to challenge these different systems that we're developing around the peripheries, to look at local application that we can use as proof of concept?
A good question, because policy is obviously a very abstract thing. And as you said, we can take the horse to water and suggest a policy, but ultimately it's up to the government what they want to do with it. But where we try to really add value as well as with the local project component, just to make things more tangible, that the government can see where this is going and what benefits it could bring. And we have been asked to actually work in an area called Ilembe, which is in KwaZulu-Natal. And why would it be Ilembe? I mean, there's not a phenomenal amount of e-waste to be found in Ilembe, but there is already Swiss-funded activity happening there, a local economic development program through Votela. And, it makes a lot of sense. What the Swiss do is when they have started putting funding and building capacity, they built on that existing capacity, which makes a lot of sense. So they have plugged our project in the local economic development framework and the wider ones for Ilembe. And one of the ideas when they asked me what we're going to do in this place where clearly there's not so much e-waste going around, so what could a local project look like? The idea that I had was to say, okay, can we perhaps play around and develop an app? And you are obviously the one who knows about that best because you helped me to find the right app service provider. But what we basically said was we're going to develop a blueprint for an app that would link up like an Uber, local informal collectors with local recyclers, households and businesses. And what we did is we looked at various local app developers, and it's absolutely astounding. And I was super excited to see the brilliant local app developers that are there available, and some of them won numerous prizes, so I can mention their names like Basadi, Kodoti, BankU. I mean, they are unbelievable in terms of blockchain technology and what they're already making. And what we did, or what you did there, is you developed a functionality matrix, so we could really compare apples with apples and settle down to one service provider that will start shortly to customize an app. And that app will then be used to do a pilot project in Ilembe with the local recyclers there and some of the informal collectors that we've identified. We're busy to incorporate this in a work plan at the moment. Other components is asset disposal strategies. And again, Chris, you were the ones that went ahead there, spoke to municipalities, asked them, what are you doing with your e-waste at the moment? And they said, well, we don't really have a consolidated process there. Highest bidder gets it. And you link them up with the recycler. And the beauty was the business model worked. It's a pilot, obviously, so you cannot, if we roll it out, we need to put it to tender. But it was evident that from a cost-benefit perspective, it made sense to actually work with the recycler. They got much more out of that. And that is where I think the linkages come now suddenly to the national government, because we have things like Operation Fakisa on the national government side, and they also speak about asset disposal strategies. It's actually part of the Fakisa plan, but we haven't seen much of it happening on the ground. So hopefully by working with the Fakisa people and sharing with them the local experiences, that would really encourage a national rollout of a procurement policy combined with an asset disposal strategy that we really would thoroughly need. Yeah, and then the policy development goes hand in hand, obviously harmonizing with bylaws. So we must look that we're not actually running into contradiction with what is sitting in bylaws or in local guidelines. So there is a need to harmonize that as well.
Just jumping in from my side again, just on a practical question relating to the producers. So we speak about EPR, extended producer responsibility. Now, we don't have a tremendous amount of production going on in South Africa in electronics. We do some, of course. A lot of our electronics is imported. What Absolutely. Is the attitude of the importers, of the distributors, of the manufacturers in South Africa? Are they on board? I mean, I know they have to be, but are they on board? Are their hearts in the right place? Are they supporting you? Are they trying to make it easy?
It entirely depends on the corporate culture, so to speak. So first of all, you're absolutely spot on. We don't really have OEM manufacturing here happening. All of that gets imported. There's another form of manufacturing, what we call assembly. So you have the likes of ACEN. They do, for example, assembly here, for white goods and stuff like that. There are very progressive ICT companies, and I can mention that, like HP and Dell. They have been there from the first hour in South Africa, but also Africa-wide to shape extended producer responsibility environments. And, they were the ones that were sitting in PROs and talking to recyclers, what's possible, what's not possible. I was at the time running a non-profit organization called the Southern African US Alliance, and we got a lot of support from producers to actually provide recycling members with hand-on advice. What would it take for them? What standards would be required that they could deal with their type of corporate electronic waste? Then you have some OEMs, I mustn't mention names, but they really sit in the background. They are fence hangers. They just wait. They get very well informed. They ask people like myself to give them a full legal overview, an update, what's going on. They have asked all the right questions, but they're not really coming to the fore. They really want to see, how far can they push the envelope. And then there are obviously the ones that are what we would call, the ones that don't want to be on the system. And those we need to definitely report. I forgot the name now. What is it called? Chris, help me. What do we call those people that are actually trying to avoid the EPR system? They are called the... Forgot the name now.
You want the rude version or the straight version? So,
the people the producers that would also have to be part of the EPR system and would need to be reported. And we see those a lot, especially the ones from the imports. So I think the ones where we really struggle are the online businesses. That is a bit of a funky one, the online businesses. And I think the government didn't think this quite through yet, okay? We might have a handle on the local distributors that take a lot, so the one-day onlys or something. But what are we going to do with Mr. Amazon? Those kind of things. The guys that have actually their facilities outside, There are also OEMs that have actually sole importer, so they don't import themselves. Are they still a producer? So there's, the proof is in the pudding, and there's some interesting scenarios there. But I would say, in principle, there was quite some support coming specifically from the ICT as well as from the White Goods Association. The South African Domestic Appliance was also very visible and active, shaping the EPR agenda.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the EPR, what we're facing currently, is basically moving away from a lot of the good work that's been done by those organizations who've been supporting the program for so long, like HP and Dell. But from a voluntary perspective, now we're getting into a mandatory producer responsibility. And that's where we can start closing the loop. And there's a lot of products. If you look at white waste products, for example, you mentioned any of the big brands that we all shop at, who will bring in irons and kettles and stoves and TVs and brand them under their own brand, but they are now the importer, but they need to be compliant with the whole system as well. But the opportunity, and again, what you said there, Susanne, and you mentioned, I've done this and I've done that. I don't think we've actually mentioned to people that you're the national coordinator, but I'm the local technical coordinator. So Susanne and I have been working together for a long time.
The cat is out of the bag, Chris.
So I think what we've seen there is that there's this tangible benefit. We've got this big brother looking over us, but they're not being prescriptive. They are
No.
helping us through looking
Yes.
at other issues in Peru and other countries where they have similar issues from developing countries. So we're not pushing anything down our throat, but then we're also taking it to the local level. And part of that local level is to look at the tangible benefits of actually doing something. And there's still a lot of movement to go through from that perspective. But it allows us also to ensure that once we're getting into that local implementation analysis, that we have a proof of concept to take it forward and show what that opportunity is that can be taken up at national level. So that's where it's also important that from a stakeholder analysis perspective, and Susanne and I are also working on developing what we would call a landscape analysis. So who's playing what role where, in which part of that value chain, bringing them all into that system. And that's a vital component to ensure that we're not coming in and doing the big brother thing. That
it's institutionalized properly, that it's not going to go away after, because the phase 2 will run until 2023, and we have to stop kind of, planning and working just like until the funding runs out. We need to create legacy projects. And I think that's extremely important to institutionalize. And that's where we spend a lot of emphasis. And just to go back to this, Chris, what I forgot to mention, the knowledge component of the SRI project is invaluable. We just had our global meeting and we're literally comparing notes on all those outcomes. And I can tell you the guys are waiting for this app. They are waiting. They want to know in Egypt, in Peru, in Colombia. We, at the same time, we have had great opportunities because Colombia has already developed a policy and they used a specific approach, a systemic design approach, how to define this. And we can really kind of cut curves. We can really go on a steeper learning curve and actually, leapfrog knowledge-wise. And I think that's where the power of the SRI project lies, in the knowledge exchange as well.
Absolutely.
So just coming back to the role of the big brands and talking about reputation and ultimately, I mean, we're talking about circular economy. Really, what we, in a sort of a perfect world, an uncomplicated, simple world, we would simply take the electronics, break it down, give it back to the guys who make it, and they'd reprocess it, and boom, out comes new stuff. But at the same time, it's not that complex. So we see with other organizations like Fair Trade, for example, where they've gone to these big global companies like Nestle and so forth, and they've traced the origins all the way back to the farmer in Kenya and done the whole thing. Those mechanisms have gained global recognition and reputations are at stake. To what extent is SRI driving that program with the big corporations globally to bring them on as partners, putting their brand on the app if necessary, make them a part of it? Is that part of the picture?
Well, I think the app will be obviously as a pilot project exactly try to do this because it is actually creating that last mile transparency. So we will for the first time see those informal collectors. They will obviously not only collect e-waste because it wouldn't be viable, but we want to design an app that actually creates maximum visibility and traceability. So we know exactly what a guy is collecting at a household and what is actually coming to the recycler. So there would be a closed loop thing. And in my mind, that should ultimately find integration into the EPR system and in the EPR obligation. So I do hope that PROs, when they see that the app is working, will turn around, go to the producers and say, look, I'm your PRO, you are, a member. We would like to work with this app. And then I think that is where the sponsorship opportunities can definitely come in, yes.
Yeah. So we're rapidly approaching the end of our show. I'd like to ask you, Susan, perhaps just to give us just a view of the future from your perspective. Tell us a little bit about some of the immediate stuff that you're working on. One of a couple of things that you're hoping for, and then we're going to ask Chris to perhaps wrap up the topic, and then we'll call it a day. So please, Susan, go ahead from your side.
Okay, so by perfect future, we have a policy, we have norms and standards. But what I'm thinking really about is the bigger picture to make sure that we position F correctly in the wider circular economy debate. We need to become an expert on the processing of secondary materials and metals specifically. We have so much more to offer than just recycle. We should really focus on a circular economy that offers access versus ownership to people in Africa, because that's what we need. So leasing models, we should push for prolonging the lifespan of electronic equipment. And I think there's a lot of space in terms of remanufacturing, which are the higher value CE options. Recycling comes just at the end, and Chris knows that I'm not very impressed about recycling. So refurbishment, repair, remanufacturing, reuse. Can we please exploit this to the hilt? Because I really think that's where the high value propositions lie, and also much higher job opportunities. Just a quick number to give you, Walter Stahel found out that the ratio between remanufacturing an engine or recycling or making it from virgin material is 270-1. That's a fact. Somewhere I can find it for you. So, it's labor intensive to do these things. So this is for me a future job creation growth strategy for South Africa and Africa at large.
Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. So it really comes down to, again, this is the Circular Economy Show. We want to take a circular economy approach. If you look at the waste hierarchy, recycling is right at the end of that. And through WRF and SRI and a lot of policies that are happening in Europe, there's also work that's being done on design for recyclability, on design for plug and play and upgrades. And we're starting to see that with policies coming through Europe, which some OEMs are not too happy about, but they're going to have to comply because it just makes sense. We can't have every single phone manufacturer making their own charging unit, and then we all end up with 300 of them in our drawer. But the focus here really is about creating that enabling environment. And that's what the WRF Street program is all about. But it's got to work with government to ensure that we create that enabling environment. How do we get from that 12% to 100%, hopefully? But at the same time, do it in a manner that fits into the socioeconomic norm and the requirements of this specific country, but also in a way that creates a sustainable future for all of us and a healthy environment. So it's moving in the right direction. Susanne, you and your team and WRF SRI are doing absolutely fantastic job. And thank you again for taking the time to be on the show. It's been marvelous, as always. And yeah, Gordon, you want to play us out?
Well, yeah, thanks very much for the wrap there, Chris. So just in terms of next week, ladies and gentlemen, please keep your eye on social media and also on the Green Economy website, greeneconomy.media, for details of next week. 1:00 Wednesday, same time, same place. We're going to play out with the Sri video, so please stick around and take a look. Special thanks from my side to Susanne and to Chris as always, and have a great day, everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
The world population is growing rapidly. So is the need for electrical and electronic goods. These devices contain all kinds of raw materials, among others valuable metals. Industries get these from metal mines, but more and more they use secondary, recycled materials. Especially in emerging economies, metal recycling has become an important business. A large informal sector has emerged that employs many workers. They do not always receive proper education, nor proper training and protection. This is Sawitri. She disassembles cell phones in Dharavi, India without protection. It's the only way to help her family. She is pushed to harm the natural environment and her own health. Carlos wanders through the streets of Lima, Peru in the middle of the night. He illegally collects waste and is seen as a social outcast. Mustafa is only 11 years old. He works at a scrap metal yard near Accra in Ghana. He can't go to school, and it looks as if he'll never be able to escape the hazardous work environment. International experts and stakeholders have now decided to tackle these problems. They were brought together by the World Resources Forum with support from the Swiss government. They have created the Sustainable Recycling Industries Roundtable and developed the Guidance Principles for the Sustainable Management of Secondary Metals, an ISO process. The 5 guidance principles for improving recycling practices are enabling safe, healthy and equitable working conditions, building local community relations and resilience, conserving and protecting the environment and natural resources, improving recovery of secondary metals, implementing a sustainable management approach. The guidance principles are important because they can also ensure a credible traceability of the recovered metals. Manufacturers of products that contain recycled metals all over the world need solid guarantees that these are sustainably produced. This is good for the economy, the environment, and the people. Waste management practices will be improved and living conditions of poor communities will become better. The guidance principles offer a gradual approach for implementing the several steps. For example, Sawitri's boss was given 1 year, a reasonable period, to identify occupational health and safety risks and to promote improvements. Now he provides the required equipment and facilities to enable safe and healthy working conditions. After having registered as a formal collector, Carlos no longer has to roam the streets at night. He's a proud and respected worker with a uniform and a future. After joining a program for working children, Mustafa can go back to school. He now wants to learn more and help to build up his country. If everybody uses the guidance principles, then we can all continue enjoying our devices, knowing that we are creating a success story. Do you want to be part of this story? You are most welcome to contact us to learn more about the guidance principles and join the Sustainable Recycling Initiative.